Hello, and welcome to this last of the series of life science lessons on the history of life. And what we're going to do today is we're going to revise the different aspects of the history of life and then have a look at some sample questions to give you an idea of how questions on this section are actually asked. If we have a look at this concept map, which covers the section is called the history of life. And in previous lessons, we looked at fossils, what they are, how they occur. Then we looked at the history of the earth and how things changed over time. Then we took a look at the geological time scale and how it illustrated the Cambrian explosion. Then we looked at mass extinctions, and I'm going to revise all of those today, and we're going to have a look at some revision questions. First thing we need to revise is the process of fossilization, and this is one of the sections that you will actually need to be able to write down as a paragraph to explain how fossilization occurs, starting with death, decay, burial, sedimentation, covered with lots of sediments, mineralization, minerals replaced by minerals from the groundwater, so it truly becomes a fossil because a fossil is made of stone, and then that fossil needs to be exposed so that we can know about it and investigate it. Then there are different types of fossils. First of all, the most common type of fossil is the body fossil, where you're actually looking at what the animal looks like, and that is made from the hard parts of the body. It can be mineralized. That's one of the methods, and that is what happened in this particular fossil. It can be carbonized, and it would then form coal, or it could be preserved in resin or tar or ice, and this is an example of amber, which is an insect which was trapped in resin, and it has now been turned to rock. Those are the body fossils. Then we also find molds, which is where the organism dies. It's covered by sediment, and then it decomposes. So the only thing left is its shape, and the shape is as a hollow in the rock. It's not the actual animal that was there. Then, if that hollow gets filled with sediment, a cast is produced, which has the outer shape, but none of the inner structure. And the last type of fossil is the traces that animals leave behind, things like footprints, burrows, and their droppings. Next thing is, how do we know how old the fossils actually are? And what scientists do is they date the rock in which the fossils are found. And there are two ways that fossil dating can occur. First one is called relative dating. And in relative dating, it's simply the older layers are at the bottom and the younger layers are at the top. This just tells you which fossil is older than which other fossil. It doesn't actually give you a number. The second one, the one that is accurate, scientifically accurate, is absolute or radiometric dating, and here scientists can work out the actual age, give or take a couple of million years, using radioactive elements, which all have what is called a half-life. And I know this section is confusing, but for scientists it's quite simple. They measure the radioactivity of the rock, and they use a graph like this. So if there is so much radioactivity, let me get back to where we were. Okay, if there is so much radioactivity, they would then say, aha, if it's 50% radioactivity, it is so many years old. And the scientists that make up the curve like this, they know exactly what they're doing. So all the scientists need to do is simply measure the radioactivity, and it's quite easy to actually find out the approximate age of the fossil. Sometimes questions are actually asked using this information, and we're going to have a look at one question now, see how questions are asked. Okay, so we start off, study the table, and that is showing how the decay of carbon-14 occurs over time. Okay, and the key thing is the number of half-lives that have elapsed. It also tells us how many years ago. For example, 1 half-life is so many years. 2 half-lives is so many years. And if you have a look, it's actually just double that. If we have a look at this, it's that figure added to that figure. So if we had to work out what x is, how would we know what x is? We would take 22,920, add 5,700, and we would actually be able to get the value of x. Okay, now let's have a look at the questions. First question says, name 2 methods used to determine the age of fossils, and here you would have to talk about, or you would have to write down relative dating and absolute or radiometric dating. Then the next one is calculate the value of x, and then calculate the value of z. Now, x, it's quite easy because you add 5,730 years every time, but how does the bottom one work? 100, 50, 25, how do we get there? We are halving it each time, so z would be half of 6.25. Let's have a look. Okay, and those are exactly the correct answers that we worked out by looking at the table. Then the last question was explain why it would not be possible to date an 80 million year old fossil. And if you look at the table, it's because at 80 million years, there would be no carbon-14 remaining in the fossil. And that's why carbon-14, because it has a short half-life, can only be used to date materials probably in about the last 50,000 years. Okay, so what we've done up till now is we have looked at fossilization and how fossils are dated and the different types of fossils. I think we need to take a break.